They come up there in the morning and then stroll around and then come at night and eat my flowers. So we've developed a familial relationship here. I mean, they're just out there roaming around whenever they want to.
Domesticated.
Do what?
Well, I don't know that they're domesticated. They just think they own my yard.
They're just friendly and hungry.
Yeah.
Our special guest today in the studio is Joe Prewitt, and Joe is he's had the title for several years of Nelson County Emergency Services Director, but he wears a lot of hats under that single title. EMS Director for years, also head of Emergency Management, and that's one of those agencies that you don't think about much. In the county, but it's about resource management when there's a significant event that happens, a disaster or big need. And also, Joe plays a big part in communications infrastructure here in the county. And have I left anything out, Joe?
I think you pretty much covered it. That's enough.
Well, and Joe is retiring this year, and they've already named Michael Reynolds to be EMS director, and I've known Mike for years, and he's got plenty of experience, and I think he'll do a fine job. But we have invited Joe and his wife Eva Prewitt to come in and talk a little bit about their years in the ambulance service. And well, Joe, how many years have you and Eva been involved in EMS?
I've been involved. My career will have a little over 46 years. Eva started about a year after me, so she'll be about 45 when we retire next couple of months.
All right. Well, you've seen a lot of changes over the years, and I know that, as you said before the show, that in Kentucky you could drive an ambulance without any formal training for, 6 months period?
Yeah.
And in the old days. And I'm sure that, there's been an effort to try to improve ambulance services across the county, across the state, I should say, because you and I both remember when that was pretty much the purview of funeral homes.
That's correct.
To do transportation.
Up until 1975.
All right. And what I guess. You want to tell a little bit about what brought you and Eva together?
Well, yeah, I will.
It had nothing to do with ambulance service.
It had absolutely nothing to do with ambulance service, and hopefully she'll be able to join us. She's finishing up our FEMA declaration from the March 3rd wind-related disaster that the county suffered, and she's meeting with the FEMA folks at the county judge's office as we speak, but hopefully she'll get done and come on over and join us. Our paths crossed many years ago in 1976, 77, selling men's clothing. I was working for Rhodey Wheeler at the Rhodey's Men's Shop, and Eva was a senior in high school and came on board as a part-time employee there, and she kind of started a sparkle in my eye from the get-go. And we did a little dating, and I was on the Bardstown Nelson County Volunteer Fire Department at the time, and loved the red lights and sirens and adrenaline rush and that type of thing. So many times we'd be out on a date, and I would have to leave and make a fire run, and she didn't quite understand all that, and so we ended up breaking up. Over the next couple of years, we parted ways three separate times. I was going one path, and she was going another path, and my sister got married, and she was going to be in the wedding, and I remember as one of the groomsmen in the wedding, we were walking down the aisle. I hadn't seen her for several months, and I really looked over across the aisle and thought, wow, I'm messing up here. Something's going wrong. So we finally, after a few months, got back together, and Eva just made the decision. She said, if we're going to make this work, you're not going to give up what you're doing, so I'm going to have to learn and start doing what you're doing. So, like I said, I was at the fire department. My mother was a nurse at Flagey, and the federal mandate came along requiring official, properly trained folks and equipment and ambulances. And Donald Ellis, Doris Ellis had Bardstown Ambulance Service, and my mother had met them, or Donald, in the ER a couple of times. Said, I believe my son would be good at this. So she kept hounding me. I was comfortable being a firefighter, and that's what I wanted to do. And finally she came in from work one day and said, you're going to take your butt out to Mr. Ellis's house and have a chat with him. So I went out and knocked on their door, and Doris and Donald took me in, and we talked a while, and he said, well, why don't you ride for a while with us and see if it's something that's going to interest you. And like you said, in those days, you could work on an ambulance for 6 months with just being a driver with no formal training whatsoever. But within the 6 months, you had to be in an EMT class somewhere. Right. So I did that. I started in October, and I rode for a while and made a few runs, made a few bad runs right up. And then it kind of got to where, I'd go responding on a fire department with the fire department to a wreck or something, end up being jumping over on the ambulance and finishing the run out. Arch Pendergrass was the chief of the fire department in those days. Oh, yeah. And I loved that man. He was a great mentor. But he finally come to me in a proper way, and he said it was very obvious that I had a great desire and love for the ambulance type work, and he needed volunteers he could count on, and he really needed me to think about what hat I wanted to wear. Right. And I contemplated that for some time and chose the EMS hat, and went to work for Donald and Doris under Bardstown Ambulance Service, and learned so much those years with Donald and Doris. They were great mentors and business people, and things transpired over the years. Well, Eva said she worked at Roadie Shop and got a part-time job at Life Care Center, and really did not enjoy that much at all. And so we talked, and she decided to go to EMT school as well and follow in the steps. So you might say from 1977 on to today, we've been, lovers, business partners, parents, grandparents, the whole gamut. But it's taken both of us. We've been fortunate that she could take the clerical side of the business. I would take the mechanics and the outside street part of the business, and we were able to mesh that. And it's been, it was hard times for us, but we were able to make it work. And so many people, I don't think, can do that, or they're not fortunate enough to be able to do that. We have been fortunate to do that.
Right. Well, the equipment needs, I guess that's always been something in the back of your mind with EMS is the equipment you have and what needs you have in equipment, because the wear and tear, and when you want to start an ambulance, you need it to make that run with that ambulance. And so and I know, since covering fiscal court, Joe, I know that you have gone to great lengths to try to save the county money by remounting ambulance boxes on other chassis in order to actually take two parts and make an ambulance without the expense of a new ambulance. A new fully equipped ambulance is going to cost how much, Joe?
Well, a vehicle today, if the county ordered an ambulance today, stripped out ambulance, I've been told by the vendors that we've checked with that ambulance alone would be upwards $200,000.
Right.
So then you take, let's just take a defibrillator is $45,000. The cot is $25,000. The power load system is another $20,000. So those are just three items within that ambulance that pushes it up around $300,000. and you don't have the other necessary equipment that lower end dollar-wise, but
Right.
still necessary equipment.
Sure.
So it would be easy to have $350,000 in one ambulance.
Do you have more than one ambulance?
We have 9 ambulances. 8 are frontline trucks. So a little history today, jumping forward, we run 4 crews per day. That's to man stations in Bloomfield, New Haven, and 2 separate stations in Bardstown. So our history has been that we have 4 trucks on today, and the crews come in tomorrow and get into 4 different trucks because you have staggered shifts. Sometimes you have late runs and
Some
things of
overlap.
that nature. So you can't just go from one truck to another. Plus, truck needs to be cleaned properly and sanitized and things of that nature. So we try to have 8 running trucks and then what we would call a backup truck. So if you have a truck down, which we do, regularly for mechanical issues, whatever, you have a truck to pull into its spot. And it's worked well over the years. We would like to have new trucks. The crews would like to have, the crews don't understand some of the rationale that is involved over the years, but under the county operation, I've still operated as if I owned it.
Right.
That's been, my goal. If it were my money and I were trying to make the service better, I would try to rob Peter to pay Paul sometimes, and we might go lighter on this expense in order to have money to do something over here. And it doesn't always work out well, but we've been fortunate to find a lot of used ambulances over the years that have been doable. And matter of fact, the county just bought one from a company in New Jersey. Eve and I went up. We always go and check them out and make sure they're what they were supposed to be. This particular truck is a fire truck. It's all red, so the fire boys would love it. But we're making it white, so we won't have to worry with the fire boys falling in love with a red ambulance. So it's in the paint shop now, but we strip them down. We take everything off of them in house and ready them for the paint shop. We get it back, we'll put everything back on. I mean, we remove the doors, everything, and they paint each item individually to make sure we're doing a good job on it. Any corrosion, they'll fix those, and then we'll take it to Lawrenceburg and have the decal package put on it. We'll bring it back, put everything on it, and we have to get it inspected by the state before it be roadworthy. So we'll have. I just told you, upwards of $200,000 for a new ambulance. We'll have probably 65 to 70 in this truck when we put it on the road. It's a diesel. It's got a little over 100,000 miles on it now. We'll put 200,000 plus on it over the next 5-6 years. So it's worked out well. It's not what everybody would do, but if we want to get equipment and give raises and things of that nature and ask the county fiscal court to do these things, we have to make sure we're running a tight budget on the other side.
Right.
Well, now, does the county have a place to do all this work, or does that go to local garages? Or?
Well, to be quite honest, most of it's done in my garage.
Okay.
We bring them in. I'm fortunate enough to have a big garage, and so we'll bring the trucks in and do that kind of work and get them ready, and then they'll go to the outside to a paint shop or the decal shop, things of that nature. But we'll put the radio in, we'll get the stretcher ready to put in, and get all the parts put back together in-house.
Well, the county's going to have to hire another 3 people here, aren't they?
Well, I've been told that.
To take the place of you and Ava in your garage.
Well, and of course, Wanda, our billing clerk, is retiring, which is Eva's sister. She's been with us 23, 24 years, and she handled all of the accounts receivable, and Eva was kind of her backup. And she retires July 31st. So all of us were going to retire July 31st. Myself, Eva, Wanda, and our medical director, Dr. Smith. So, but that's pretty much your whole admin staff walking out the door. And over the past few months, I really thought about it. This is not a good deal. And I talked to Judge Hutchins and Deputy Judge Metcalf, and we're going to bring folks in here that basically do not know much of the history. You can't hire a billing clerk for EMS billing today, like Wanda and Eva came up learning it. They're certified coders for Medicare and Medicaid. They have to have specialized training. So we decided that an outside billing company would be the best way to go for that.
So not going to do it in-house anymore?
Not going to do it in-house. Well, matter of fact, outside billing took over June 1st, and we've been working through issues with Wanda still being there. But they'll do all the billing for the county. If they have problems with a particular run sheet, a patient sheet, then they'll have to send that back to someone in-house to get that cleaned up and send it back to them to make it billable. So that led us to Eva staying on after Wanda leaves. Michael Reynolds replaced me, and I'll be out of that role, except I'll still be available to him July 31st. But Eva will transition over to Wanda's office, more or less, as a clerical billing type person to answer those. We take all scheduled runs in-house. So if the hospital needs to schedule someone to be transferred to Louisville, that comes into the EMS office. It doesn't go to the 911 dispatch center. So there's some person there that's got to schedule those calls and put them in a queue so that we know where the ambulances are and how they can be taken care of timely. And then they put them in the CAD. Eva or Wanda put it in the CAD for dispatch, and dispatch sees it, and they'll dispatch it out to the ambulance. So someone will be, in the next few weeks, Michael and the judge and deputy judge will work on Eva's replacement, which, her big role is education and compliance, all those things that keep the service out of trouble. That's where Eva's role has been. And you really don't think about all those things, but we're scrutinized by the public, the state government, the local government. So someone has to make sure that our T's are crossed and I's are dotted. That's been Eva's role.
So she's going to try to help break somebody in.
So yes, she'll be there to help Michael train his assistant or deputy director. I'm not sure what they'll be called, but Eva's position will be filled by someone pretty soon. Eva will still be there to help that transition, plus she'll fill in, and then once that occurs, then they'll get a clerical type person hired to replace Eva, and we'll all be out the door.
Try to have more of a seamless transition.
Yes. Nobody's left without being able to ask questions or get answers from folks that have been there and know it.
Well, tell me how you say you have 4 crews. How many runs a day would you estimate in a typical day do your crews?
We average right now, and Jim has seen those reports that I do every month for fiscal court, but we are averaging 22.6 runs a day. And that transition this year we'll go over 7,000, somewhere in the neighborhood of 7,500 calls this year made through the service. A number of those, about probably somewhere in the 18% range, are incomplete, non-transport type calls.
In other words, you get there and you have to help somebody.
Well, we're working, but we still do lift assist. That is not a mission of EMS. It just has kind of fell on EMS for whatever reason when someone is at home by themselves or whatever, and maybe sometimes not even by themselves, but they get down in the floor or in the bathtub and they can't get out. It's just, for whatever, over the past couple of years has become an EMS duty to be dispatched and handle that. We've had to start charging for that, but I can tell you that we rarely collect anything from the patient because it's not an insurance reimbursable. Medicare or Medicaid doesn't reimburse for it. So it's become a burden on us for the sure lack of resources that we have to be able to respond to those when we may be tied up on transfers to Louisville from the hospital. They average 7 to 8 a day. That's 3.5 hours per truck out of, the math gets real fine-lined when you start figuring how many man hours are involved in the runs that we make. So we deter the lift assist. We've asked for fire department assistance from that, and we're getting some help from some, and others don't feel like that's their mission either. So they don't have the manpower and resources, but it's something we have to deal with, and if nobody else can help, EMS is the one that will fall back to.
All right, Joe, let's take a commercial break. You're listening to Bradford and Brooks and our very special guest, Nelson County Emergency Services Director, Joe Prewitt, and we'll be back with more with Joe, and hopefully Eva, if she makes it in before the top of the hour. We'll be back in just a moment. Stay tuned. All right, you're back with Bradford and Brooks. Jim Brooks and Margie Bradford with you on this beautiful Wednesday morning in downtown Bardstown. And we'll be with you till the top of the hour. And then stay tuned to WBRT for the best in local and state news and obituaries. Our special studio guest today is Joe Prewitt. Joe is he's Emergency Services Director for the county and Director of EMS. And he over the years, he's worn quite a few different hats. And is planning to retire this year. And Joe, we'll miss you when you're gone.
Well, I'm probably going to miss it more than you're going to miss me.
Well, Joe, can you kind of give us an overview of how EMS has changed since you and Eva first got involved, and now I assume that years ago, and maybe it's still necessary, a certificate of need to have an ambulance service.
Yes.
Okay, and that of course, we could spend a whole show on debating certificate of need.
Right.
But anyway, from the beginning, how did you all manage? Is it, because starting from scratch, you basically have to have a pool of people and equipment, and that stuff's not cheap. It wasn't cheap 30 plus years ago either.
That's correct. We were fortunate, I guess, when we started the service, and we had no plans to start an ambulance service. We were comfortable working for the owner of the service at the time, and different things happened and led us through the path that we went through. But we had 11 additional EMTs that were dedicated, fire, EMS, and we all volunteered when we first started. It was a total volunteer service. We met a gentleman in Calhoun, Kentucky. His name was Mike Muster. And Mike Muster was a funeral home was in Calhoun, but they also dealt in ambulance equipment, ambulances and things of that nature. So when we met him, and I think it was like early February of 82, 83, and we drove down to his place and found an ambulance graveyard. And basically that's exactly what it was. Behind his funeral home, he had a field full of ambulances. Trade-ins, wrecks, whatever, you name it, he had it. Then he had a garage that was full of surplus equipment, stretchers, oxygen equipment, all the basic needs. So we explained to him what we wanted to do, and he told us that he had a 1976 Modulance ambulance, a Type 1, which is a truck chassis, and a box on the back. And this box was all metal box, was a steel box on a single rear wheel ambulance chassis. But he would let us have that. It had some damage on it, and we could get that from him and the necessary equipment to get that truck on the road for $8,000. And we had about $1,000 between us. So we came back home and we started thinking about how we could raise the money to get this ambulance and equipment from him. And so even I was in the farming, and we had some pigs and we had a couple of cows, and the other guys throwed in some money, and we actually had some donors that donated some funds to help us get started. And we got, I think if I remember, we got up around $7,400. And I called Mr. Muster up and asked him if he would carry us for the remainder. He said, sure he would. So we made the trip down in late February to give him our check for $7,300 and pick up the equipment. And I drove this ambulance back, and it scared me absolutely to death. I was coming up the WK, and the rear, it was so heavy. The rear wheels just seemed like it was floating all over the place. I thought, oh my gosh, what have we done? But we got it back and came up the hill at Old Kentucky Home. I started up the hill and mashed down on the gas and popped, the engine blew.
Oh gosh.
Yes, sir. The engine blew. It was cold. We had a 12 by 70 trailer we was operating, living out of on Caney Fork. And we had an ambulance. We just sunk every bit of the money and donations. And our guys was waiting to see this ambulance as we were coming back. And I'm pulled off at the top of the hill and needing a wrecker. And so fortunately, we had some friends, again, mechanics and such, and we had one of those 12 by 20, look like an igloo, a carport things at our trailer. So it was spitting snow, and we could get the cab of the truck in there and got the hood off of it, put tarps on both ends and some heaters, and rebuilt that motor in 2 weeks, and that with the help of our friends, and got it running. We had scheduled for state inspection on our stuff in April, and we didn't have a lot of time to get it done. And I remember too that you had to have a radio system, and you had to be able to talk to the hospital on their frequency, and you had to be able to talk to a base station. Well, Mr. Muster had a old tube-style base station, probably as big as your console, that he had taken in on trade on something. And it weighed, I bet, 100 pounds. And I had that in the back of that ambulance. We had the phones back then, if you recall, you had a voice message on your phone, you had a little beeper you could take with you, and you could bring your number and do that beep, and it would play your voice message. So we said, well, how are we going to set off our tones for the inspector for our paging system? So we put our ideas together, and we put an antenna out on the fence post of a board fence for the radio. And when we would set off the radio, then a person at the radio would hold the mic down and play the beep through the radio, and that was our notification system in the very ancient form that it was, but it worked. We got our truck put together, the inspector came, and we were able to get by the skin of our teeth all through the hoops to start that service on March 31st of 83. And then, of course, we went on from there, and the contract come up in June for the county contract. And so the 11 of us were still volunteering and making our runs and doing what we could and bid on that contract. And fortunately, the county gave us a shot at starting a service for them.
So you had 11 volunteers?
11 volunteers, 11 original EMTs that started with us and gave their all. Were the most dedicated people, like Anthony Mattingly, Timmy Rice. Terry Shelburne, many of those folks that did it because the love of caring and love of helping folks. It wasn't that they, we could take one of Purnell's old-fashioned sausage in a little 1-pound package, and we'd stretch that sucker for 2 days with the people that were they would sleep on the floor of the trailer, you know, and were making ambulance runs, and we really, you know, we didn't have anything, and we all pooled our nickels and dimes together to get us over the hump and to make something out of the service.
Wow. Now, at what point did, and I remember this happening, I just don't know the timing when EMS became part of county government?
2003, July 2003.
All right. I don't know that EMS to me seems like is a service that you're not into it. Well, I guess there are companies that are in it for a profit, but it's not a big moneymaker because of all the cost involved and to do it well.
Well, that's correct. I mean, and I think at that point in time, administration may have thought that there was a profit in it, and we were, you know, Eve and I were given pretty much an ultimatum that either the county was getting out of the ambulance business altogether, or we would be getting out of the ambulance business altogether. And so we thought about that a little bit. You know, even many pay periods, we did not draw a check. Fortunately, we had some farming, and you know, we started a limousine service in that time. We started a answering service in that time for the doctors, and anything we could do to make an extra buck.
Right.
We would dabble in it. We had a wheelchair service and taxi service for a few years, and tried to do that type of thing along with the ambulance service to keep the head above water. But you know, there came a time when there seemed, you know, maybe it was our fault. I mean, we were doing a lot of things on Caney Fork with an old farmhouse, and we made it look really nice, and we put whiteboard fence around, and I guess folks did think we were rolling in the jack, you know, so to speak, but we really weren't. We were doing everything ourselves and making it work, and we had these other little businesses on the side to help supplement things, but in 2002, it was obvious that we were going to have some issues with continuing of a contract with the county, and the way it was. But it was put to us that we couldn't survive on our own and keep Bloomfield New Haven stations. That was absolutely just could not happen, and us being able to fund that. So if we decided to stay on our own, we were going to have to take the burden of pulling the ambulances out of Bloomfield New Haven, and then that would fall to us. And we just weren't prepared to do that.
Right.
So we didn't know, you know, what's an ambulance service worth? I mean, what do we do here? We'd worked hard and paid off most of the equipment we had. And so we reached out to some folks in the EMS business, and, you know, how do you know what your business is worth? So there happened to be a company in Arizona that did that very thing. They appraised ambulance services. So they came in and looked at what we had, looked at the books, and appraised us, and put a number figure to it. And we shot it to the county, and they, you know, fiscal court looked at it and what they could do going forward, which, you know, under county government, EMS could do so much more for the employees, the retirement system, things that we just could not afford to do.
Right.
So it made sense to do that. You know, we were stupid green kids, so we made a lot of mistakes in that deal. I mean, you know, out of the kindness of our heart, we're going to carry the county for 5 years on the purchase, and then we took $25,000 of the purchase and bought equipment and donated it back. Well, we'll be able to take that off our taxes as a donation anyway, and it'll help the service out. Until Scarlett Hibbs had me come into her office in April or last of March, and even I had to go up there to get our taxes done, and she laid this big tax burden bill out on us that we didn't have enough funds to cover. We didn't know. We're carrying the county, but you got to pay taxes on the whole amount today.
Yeah.
It was another learning experience of a hard knocks. So we started selling stuff, sold anything we could sell to raise the funds to meet IRS deadline. So that, we were always learning, always getting hard knocks and getting up and taken away from it. But the past few years under county government, both Prewitt and myself, and the employees in particular, has been a blessing, really.
Good. So it took a lot of the burden off of you.
Yes, ma'am. I started getting a check every other Friday, and that was like, wow, I'm actually getting some take-home money here.
Our new county judge has stepped up, and of course he campaigned on it, but saw the need to improve pay for first responders. And 911 dispatch, now part of county government, and I think that was a good move that will pay dividends. And then hopefully there's some movement on the EMS side, because I know that you've had to deal with recruiting and having competitive pay for to recruit to people for EMS in Nelson County.
Our profession falls into a number of other professions, nurses, physicians, but in Kentucky, the paramedics are not keeping up. The number of paramedics are not keeping up with demand. There are a number of services through my dealings with Kentucky Board of EMS and Kentucky Ambulance Providers. There's services in Kentucky that have one or two medics on their whole service, trying to fill all those hours. Washington County's having a difficult time recruiting medics for their service, and as a close to home county. But it's becoming a supply and demand issue. Whoever is paying the best, has the best benefits, the best equipment. It's not all about pay. It's about what do I have to work with when I come to work for you. The pay is a significant part of it, and that's what brings people over. But every county, and our problem is really twofold. We have a problem with our location being in proximity to the metro, Metro Louisville, the Oldham counties, the Bullitt County. They're all paying and providing a much higher level of service than most counties can afford. And you try to live within your means, but you also have to be able to provide the service. If you're not able to provide the service, then somebody's going to hear about it, and something's going to happen. I can say in my career, there's been probably what I can count on my two hands, the number of times that a caller calling for an ambulance in an emergency situation has had to wait much more than 15 minutes to get that. That's what the bottom line is for me, is you've got to be able to provide the service when the need be. The scheduled runs, the non-emergency things, you can work around those. People don't always understand, but somebody's emergency is now your emergency. And you better have that mindset. You better take that home every night. Their emergency, when you get there, may not seem that bad, but when they make that phone call, their emergency is your emergency, and you've got to deal with it. And that has driven me for years. That I don't want any resident or tourist or anyone that's in our county to be deprived or to have adverse effects of not being able to get the service they need. Bardstown is very fortunate that Bardstown Fire is making med runs, and sometimes they'll get on the scene first, they'll assess the situation and start treatment. Other times we get on the scene first. But having that addition, I think my staff or our staff, knowing that they have someone responding. We may be at the hospital trying to offload a patient and give a report, but we've got to come, the hospital elected to move 5 miles out of town. And that puts a burden on EMS trying not only to get patients to them, but to respond back to the most populous part of the county when the need be.
Right. Now, it wasn't there an issue at one point where paramedics could opt to do work with hospital in the ER or something?
Is
that true?
That is right as of today.
Okay.
Matter of fact, Flagey hired one of our medics to work in the ER about 2 months ago. And UK has 2 of our medics that work up there part-time. And they do they can do a number of things under their skill set in the ER, and they're allowed to do that under state law. The state law says that should be limited to the emergency room, but we find as we look out amongst some of the bigger hospitals that they are tweaking what they're calling a medic to a tech or something of that nature.
Right.
But if you look at their application, it says you must be a paramedic to apply. So they're being able to use them more. And, paramedics have to look at that. I'm in and out, climbing up and down ambulance day in, day out. I'm out in the elements. If I'm making as much, maybe more in the ER, why wouldn't I want to be in that controlled environment? So many of them are 8, maybe 12-hour shifts. I'm working EMS a 24-hour shift. I'm up all night. I don't get to sleep in my bed every third day. So there's a number of things that are driving that. At some point, I think the 24-hour shifts are going to go away. Right now, you get a mixed reaction to it because a lot of our folks moonlight at other services, and if the 24-hour shift went away, that would hurt that ability to do that.
Well, Joe, we're just about down to the wire. Any final observations about EMS and your and Eva's tenure with the business you never planned to start?
Yeah, EMS has been good to Eva and I, and it's been good to Eva and I. Don't get me a little tore up here, but we've been blessed with the employees and staff that we've had over the years. Today's staff is just immaculate, the guys. This county has a medic to each EMT. That is rare. There's not many counties that can say that, but we're pretty much fully staffed with paramedics.
Awesome.
And I'd like to think that I had something to do with that. I'd like to think that we leave a mark on the county, that we've been truly dedicated to providing this service.
Okay. All right. Well, that's going to do it with our interview with Joe Prewitt, Emergency Services Director and longtime Director of Nelson County EMS. And Joe, we appreciate you and Eva's service, and of course all of the employees that you all have had over the years. I mean, they've come out and visited me at times when I needed it, and I'm always thankful and grateful that they provided the services.
Absolutely. I think very few people really realize the amount of service that you and your wife have given to this county. So.
Right. All right, Bill Margie, that's it. We got to go. We'll see you next Wednesday with another Bradford and Brooks. Have a great week, everybody.